So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
Hello, good evening. This is Stacy Trasancos today in for Timmerie. I want to welcome you to the show and look forward to talking about some trending topics over this next hour with you. You know, one thing I always love about filling in for Timmerie is as much as I think I'm on top of the issues and as much as I think I'm a pretty cool grandma with my knowledge of all the things that are going on in the faith and science arena, I'm always pushed by the producers of the show here, by Lucas Holt, to look at new articles that I probably wouldn't have looked at, and to look at new websites that are collecting articles. I mean, I joined the Catholic cyberspace back when blogs were cool, and I thought I knew all the Catholic blogger world, and I do. I feel blessed to be very networked in the Catholic world. But I sort of along the way lost some touch with some of the newer topics, and so it's very interesting to me to have a chance to do this, and it pushes me, and I pray for that specifically, pushes me into some new ideas and to talk about some things I probably wouldn't have talked about otherwise. What are we going to talk about? Well, I have an interesting excerpt from St. John Henry Newman from the Loss and Gain Project, which is a project, is a fellowship of former Anglicans who are helping us learn about the Catholic faith. And so there's an excerpt on conviction and counting the cost. This is about conversion. And so I'm going to talk through some of what he wrote about conversion, because that's the beautiful thing about classics is they apply timelessly. They apply to any time. And he says some very convicting things about conviction. I'm a convert myself, I've said many times, and I always find it interesting to think about what that means. I mean, conversion is not a one-time thing. We're constantly being converted. And there were some words of real comfort and joy from St. John Henry Newman. So pray for us. And we will go through some of the things he said about conviction. Basically, spoiler, don't convert unless you're really all in. Like, throw it all down on the floor and dive in all the way, or don't. You got to be all in. It's an all or nothing proposition. And as a convert myself, and I know you've probably felt that before, whether you're a convert or whether you're a revert or whether you just go through periods of spiritual dryness, it does come down to that. Like, do you believe what Christ said or not? There's no halfway. It's very black and white. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. The other two topics that I want to talk about, so I kind of want to do that one first so we lay some groundwork here, because the other two topics are a little more difficult. There is a very interesting summary expose piece from Katie Herzog, who writes for Barry Weiss, Common Sense with Barry Weiss, a journalist, about how she goes into a lot of detail about how medical schools are now denying biological sex. I remember hearing about that several months ago, but I think we need to take the wrapper off of this topic and actually talk about what that's going to mean to our children and our future if medical schools are teaching their students to deny biological sex. We'll do that in the second segment. In the last segment of this hour, another faith and science thing. This comes from the Fathom magazine online. And the title is Neuroscience Approves of a Holy Imagination. Now, that is definitely clickbait. I've seen a lot of titles written in cyberspace, and that's definitely one that you would click on it. But this is a Christian magazine, and I actually have some thoughts on what the author is saying about how our brains are made for transcendent moments of beauty. I would actually tweak some of this. It's kind of like when I'm combing my daughter's hair and I'm combing through to get some of the tangles out. I would comb through this a little bit and tweak some things to make it more consistent with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But we'll go through that because it's still interesting that neuroscience, what does neuroscience and holy imaginations, counting our blessings, feeling gratitude, what does that have to do, not just for ourselves, but for us, humanity as a community? So there were some interesting things to tease out, and I would love to talk through that and offer you my brilliant and sincere wisdom, my hard-earned and still forming wisdom on what things like this actually mean to us in real life. Because I'm kind of like, I'm a very, I don't really think of myself as a scholar, but I guess you could. I do read a lot of things, comment on a lot of things, get asked to comment on a lot of things. But, for me, if I can't put it to work in real life, I don't really need that. Like everything has to be like, okay, what do I do? Because I'm a doer. I'm a chemist who studied theology, but I like to be able to know. I want to know how it works. What are the atoms and molecules doing in my brain? If I'm having some kind of holy imagination moment, I want to know how it works, and I want to know what I'm supposed to do with it. Because I don't really just have room in my head to cram a bunch of artifacts that aren't necessarily going to help me live a better life. If you would like to add to any of this varied and vast conversation, please call into the studio and they will get you on in the lineup. So the line there is 888-914-9149. So the cool kids don't dial the 1 before you start, because you know that now. Like, I still dial the 1. I still put my phone up to my ear and listen for a dial tone before I start punching the buttons. My mobile phone, I put it to my ear and listen to a dial tone sometimes, and you might not even know what I'm talking about. My kids would look at me like I'm crazy. But if you need to call into the studio, 1-888 or just 888-914-9149. That's the line, and it'll get you in the queue for discussing some of this. Okay, so back to laying that groundwork. Newman bites from the Loss and Gain Project, the Fellowship of Former Anglicans Helping Others Learn About the Catholic Faith. Let's go through what Newman has to say. Okay, so he's talking on convictions and counting the cost. And by counting the cost, he's saying you must look at the matter, that being whether you want to enter the church or not. You must look at the matter in the face and count the cost. If you do not come in this spirit, you may as well not come at all. High and low, learned and ignorant, must come to learn. Okay, so when you say, I want to be Catholic, I'm all in. Whether it was confirmation as a teenager, whether you wandered from the faith and came back, or whether you were always a Catholic but you had some really hard stuff to go through in your adult life, or whether you're like me, an adult convert. This is true. Like, nobody told me this. I figured this out for myself. If you don't come into this saying, I am going to be a lifelong learner, I have so much to learn, then you're not doing it right. And yeah, I say I figured it out for myself. I figured it out after some time. Honestly, as a convert at first, I was so afraid people would know I was a convert. Like, I tried to hide it. I started writing almost as soon as I became Catholic for our diocesan paper, and I was so afraid. I was like trying to write like I was a lifelong Catholic, like, oh, I know all this stuff about the catechism and about life, and I was afraid somebody might know I was actually a convert, and I wanted them to know I was so serious. I was afraid of failing, to be honest. I mean, I can say that now because I've lived long enough. I was afraid of failing. But John Henry Newman talks about that. So you have to come into it saying, look, I've got the intention of being a lifelong learner. I'm not experimenting with Catholicism. I'm not going to try it on like a dress in the dressing room at the mall and see how it fits, and I might take it off and I might move on to something else. No, you've got to be all in. Throw it all down on the floor, be all in. Don't come like you're just going to a lecture, or you're visiting someone's home, or something like that. You've got to say, I'm all in. But then once you're all in, okay, so I don't know what it's like to be anybody but myself. So I'm just going to tell you what it was like being me. even though I was all in and I knew I wasn't going to speak out of both sides of my mouth, that I was going to accept all the teachings of the church 100%. And if I didn't understand something or didn't like something, I was going to say, hey, Stacy, it's you. It's not the church. You might need to try this on a little longer, try harder to learn, pray to learn. Another one of my fears was that I would not be a good enough Catholic, that I wouldn't have faith that would last, that, what do you do? And even today, what do I do if my faith disappears? Well, today I know what to do, but back then I wasn't so sure. And John Henry Newman says, don't distress yourself about that, okay? Because that's from the devil. The enemy wants to hold you back. That if God has begun a good work in you, he will perfect it. Don't you love that? He has chosen you. God will be faithful to you. He will put your cause into his hands, and we just need to wait on him. And we need to persevere. We need to pray that we will persevere. He says, what good work will you ever begin if you bargain first to see the end of it? Meaning, if you really, really, really want to know how things are going to turn out, and if you're like me, sometimes you've really, really begged God, show me how this is going to turn out. I need to know what's going to happen. I need to know what that other person's going to do. I need to know how this financial situation is going to get solved. I need to know if these plans I have for my kids and their education is going to work or not. Like, I need to know, I need to read into the future. And I need to know I'm going to have enough faith to get through all of this. You kind of have to, like when I said throw it all down, you have to just be willing to roll with the punches. I worked for Bishop Strickland, and he told me that the other day is one of the best compliments I've ever had. Stacy, I appreciate the way you roll with the punches. I'm like, well, I learned to in life, because I learned that you know, who am I sometimes to say everything has to be just the way I think it needs to be right now. And I used to be that way with my relationships, with my children, with my parents. Like, this is the right thing to do. I'm Catholic and I know objective truth. And this is the right way that everything needs to be. And everybody needs to listen to me and do what I'm saying. And then we'll all be happy and we can just go on with our lives. And I actually did spend probably, about a decade as a Catholic being that way and wondering why I was not doing good at evangelizing. It sounds funny to say it now. But that's what John Henry Newman is saying here. If you, and some of us moms call it, there's that cliche, God can write straight with crooked lines. I fully believe this. What good work will you ever begin if you bargain first to see the end of it? If God had said to me, and I want you to think about this for your life, if God had revealed to you exactly how things were going to turn out, would you have still done it? There's a lot of things I say yes. There's been a lot of heartbreaks in relationships and parenting where I might have said, I don't know if I could go through that again. If I knew how much it was going to hurt. Or I think of people who've lost their children, Would you go through it all if you knew exactly how it was going to turn out? And that's the beauty of living a life of faith, because it's not faith if you know everything. Faith is the evidence of things unseen. Faith is throwing it to Christ and saying, I give you everything, Christ, and I'm going to walk by faith, and I'm going to be all in, and I'm going to pray for the gift of faith when I don't have it. And I'm going to trust that whenever those times come, if I pray for it, you're going to grant it to me. And he does. That's happened to me many times. Just ask and you will be given the faith you need, the grace you need. But that's part of the cost of conviction. The cost of conviction is that whatever the truth demands of you, you're up for it. You're up for it. Many a convert has had to change the way he or she lives. That was true for me, but it was beautiful. You just change the way you live. You think that contraception is the way to take control of your fertility, and you let go of it and you say, okay, I'm going to change the way I think about that, and you don't know what's going to happen. Now, I've told you before, I ended up having, after I became Catholic, I already had 2 kids. I ended up having 5 more kids, and I also ended up having 5 miscarriages. So I took it all. Just took it all. So that's what he's saying here. If you are half convinced, pray for a full conviction. If you're listening right now and you're wondering, I don't know what I could add to this conversation, what is something that you changed because of your faith? Okay? What I would like to hear from you. What is something you changed because of your faith? And how's it helped you? You changed because of your faith. You made a life change. How did that work out for you? Did it? What happened in your life when you did that? Did it make you stronger? Did it help you? Did it make you happier? I think it's helpful for people to hear stories like that. And John Henry Newman also says, just to build on this idea a bit, different people need different things to be convinced. Some people are convinced all of a sudden. Some people are not convinced all of a sudden, and they need more time. They need arguments. They need to read Aquinas' 5 Ways. They need to have debates with people. They need to study all the different religions. Some people, it's just a moment when you've done enough running and you get to that moment and the lights come on and you can never again not be Catholic. That's how it happened for me. I knew. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton describes such a moment when she knew the Eucharist is really Christ. But other people need more time. They need time to hear the arguments and sort them out. They're more gradual. John Henry Newman compares it to like being in a court. In a court of law, there are some convictions that happen instantly, the jury knows, and there are some convictions that happened over much deliberation. And I think about this in the context of dealing with our own relationships. Okay, so if you're a parent and you've got children who are getting older, or if you've got children who are young and you're worrying what they're going to do when they're teenagers, one of the hardest things for parents with kids, I've got 4 teenagers right now, one of the hardest things to deal with is when those kids question their faith. Okay, so like, I don't know about other families, but in my family, it does not happen like this. Baby's born, baby's baptized, baby goes to religious education, homeschooling, CCD classes, has good relationships with priests, baby goes through all the sacraments, baby starts to grow up and is encouraged to seek the truth and be an independent thinker because we're Catholic and that's what we do. Question, reason, use your intellect, use your will, and search for truth. This happened with all my kids. They do just what you taught them to do. But the thing is, before they're mature enough, they oftentimes think they have found the path to truth that mom and dad just never knew, or that the church never knew. They think they're on some path. They almost all my kids at some point or another have questioned what it means to be Catholic. And I think they had to go through that. You know, my kids are the ones, if you tell them don't go run in the street, they would do it, because they don't want to just take your word for it. They need to go experience it for themselves. And so it makes for very difficult years of parenting when your kids are doing things that make you want to duct tape them and sit them on the couch and not let them ever go anywhere until they're 35. But you have to deal with that. And John Henry Newman in this essay is saying that conviction is a state of mind. What convinces one kid may not convince another. But the things they're going through, the questioning, if you've got a kid who's questioning, if you've got a loved one, a spouse, a parent, a relative, a friend who's making choices you don't think are right, or you know that aren't right according to the Catholic faith, because you know better. Sometimes people need to go through that stuff because they're going to be a better witness later on. Sometimes they have to go through it. When somebody told me that about my kids, I was like, ugh. But I want to know how it's all going to turn out. And so I do really believe, I know I would not be the woman I am today if I hadn't gone through the things I went through. I know what it's like to be on both sides of the faith-science fence because I lived that. And I guess I had to go through that. We have a caller here with a story from her life. Herminia from California, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate you taking my call.
Absolutely. What you got?
Well, I was raised Catholic. I'm in my early 60s, and we did what our parents told us to do. You have to do this, you got to go to church, you have to do your sacraments, and we just went with emotions without too much. Take catechism classes, but it's just not sinking in. Just went through the motions. As I got closer, right out of high school, I wanted to be married through the Catholic Church. I did that. That was my wish, so I was learning more a little bit about it. Unfortunately, our marriage didn't work. I have divorced, not annulled, but I am divorced. But as I got older, beyond my 40s, I just wanted to live, and okay, if I go to church, I go to church. If I don't, I don't. If I go to confession, I don't go to confession. So pulling myself very far away. But again, just in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, a lot of things changed in my life that I noticed were, to me, miraculous. And I realized that in being more prayerful and directing my prayers more specific with the things and the struggles in my life, that I was praying for specific things. I was learning, going to some classes and courses, and more with the Catholic faith as an adult and learning more about it. And one of the things that I believe triggered me was learning about the generational prayers that we need to learn to help with the generational things that come by to our families. I can't remember the specific wording. I apologize. So with learning that and being, again, more specific, I was able to start praying for myself and say, I don't want to just drink whenever, just because. And one day, just out of the blue, I've been witnessing this to a lot of my family. I picked up a bottle of beer like I used to in the afternoons, and it tasted horribly sour like when I was first ever introduced to it. And I didn't understand it. I took another sip, tastes just as ugly. Put it away, threw it away. Within a few days, I was offered, you don't have a couple beers? Nope. And within 2 days or 3, I said, wait a minute, I've been praying for this. I did not want to drink any longer. This is a miraculous thing. And I have not been tempted. I have not drank in almost 3 years. The same thing with other character defects, if we want to call them that. But I prayed specifically for things that I knew of our 10 commandments that I should not be participating in. And almost each and every one of them, I would give you a specific thing when it happened or how it happened, but we don't have time for all that. I have 7 grandkids that I see a lot of miracles in them, 22 to almost 7. I have 3 kids, adults, and they've gone through their struggles, and being prayerful and reminding them to be prayerful and watching the miracles that have been going through them. And just our family noticing it, having a family member pass away and not feel so mournful. And I think to myself, we now can praise. We now know, I feel like I've learned, more and more. Main thing, be prayerful. I would like to say I pray at the rosary every day. I was for about 8 months or 9. I have to get back to that. But again, I know what I need to do, and I know what the Lord has given me and blessed me with.
Oh, that's an amazing story. I think a lot of people can really resonate with that. Would you mind holding on to the phone, Herminia? We're going to go to break, but I would love to ask you more about your experience when we get back. This is Stacy Trasancos in for Timmerie. We'll be back after the break.
Catholic Order of Foresters is proud to sponsor the Relevant Radio Studio line. For information about employment opportunities and flexible premium life insurance plans, visit relevantradio.com/forester.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Hello, welcome back to the show. This is Stacy Trasancos in for Timmerie today. And before the break, we were talking with Herminia. We had just finished going through some of John Henry Newman's words on the cost of conviction, about being all in if you're going to give your life to Christ and make changes in your life. Herminia, you were telling us about the powerful impact making changes consistent with the truth the church teaches had in your life. I wanted to hear a little more from you. You were saying that you couldn't taste, you prayed for this, you couldn't taste the beer after a while. Looking back now, I mean, I think we could all, things like that have happened to me too. It's like, oh, God just took away. Yeah.
It's
Tell us
incredibly
about
miraculous because alcoholism has been an issue and a problem, unfortunately, in a lot of our generations.
Yes.
And I didn't drink as a young lady, and I didn't drink as a married person. I would occasionally have a margarita or two. But again, as I got older and divorced, and I said, okay, well, sit down and do this and do that. And then I started to think about it, that if my son has been able to get himself to where he is now, miraculously recovered from different things, why am I trying to be out here like a teenager, doing all these things that I don't need to be doing? And part of it was partaking in excessive alcohol at times, functioning, going to school, work, whatever it was. But I knew that I had to do something, and I had to pray specifically for myself for certain things to change. And that was one of them. So when it happened, it was subtle, like I said, for a few days. And then all of a sudden, I didn't crave it. I was not tempted. And then my friend says, does it bother you that I'm drinking near you? I said, no, I'm not even tempted. And she looked at me and she goes, okay, I don't want to be disrespectful. So I realized it was miraculous in that by looking back within a few days. So as I say, the urge for alcoholism was gone, of drinking alcohol, whichever, excess or not. I can sit in a bar with friends and talk, and I don't have that. Thank you, Jesus. I don't have that temptation. Oh, they'll have a beer. It doesn't happen. Thank you, Lord. And that's what I wanted. I wanted it away. And as I said, some of the things that we don't follow from our 10 Commandments that, our Lord has given us, I was partaking in a lot of those things. I don't need to get down to the nitty-gritty, but I prayed for those specifically, and those as well have left me. And it's almost 3 years that I have not even been tempted to have one alcoholic beverage, and I praise my Lord. Yes.
That's amazing. And that is such so often the stories in our faith lives don't have something so tangible, but I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And it fits with what St. John Henry Newman was saying. If we wonder if we're gonna be good enough Catholics, or we wonder if we're gonna be good enough at having a life of faith, all you need to know is along the way, ask Jesus for what you need. Sometimes I say, give me what I need that I don't know that I need, but just talk, pray. And he says this in here, that phrase, pray incessantly, pray without ceasing. Make your whole life a prayer. Say every day, God, give me the grace to do your will. And if there's something specific you're struggling with, it's okay to be specific. I mean, we see that even in the readings today where Moses was saying, God, you burdened me with all these people and they're complaining because the manna is not meat and they want meat, and you make me act like the foster father of all these people. If that's how you're going to treat me, God, then just kill me now. He was kind of being a bit dramatic. It's like, that's how it looks when you love me, just kill me now. I can't do this. And we all know how the story turns out.
And again, turning it into God, giving it to Him completely, and just trusting His will, and knowing that He does miracles, and it won't come when I expect it. And I didn't realize it for a few days, but then not just that. Like I said, other things. I had not been to confession for so many years. Again, all of a sudden, I was praying specifically. I'm back in the confessional, and I'm going through so many different things. But it is, to me, the most important to be specific when I pray. And when my children and my adult children ask or say we're worried about this or the other, they may not be practicing Catholics, but I say to them, ask, be patient, and He's going to bring it to you.
Just ask. That's such a great testimony. Thank you so much for calling in, Herminia. I'm going to move on to our next topic so that we can have room for them. But I appreciate it when people, this is one of the blessings of doing the show, when people call in and I get to know that person, and we all get to know that person because we're listening to the radio. And thank you, especially special blessings to you, Herminia, for having the call, answering the call to make the call today. We appreciate it. Switching gears a little bit, but still along the same lines, I wanted to do that first cover on what Newman was saying, just to get some groundwork laid here. we have to be searching for objective truth. Okay, there is objectivity and there is subjectivity, but we can have our subjective, like right now it's 6:30 my time, Central Time, and it's not 6:30 in other parts of the world, right? But it is objectively true that it's 6:30 where I am now. What's objectively true is that the world, the Earth is rotating and revolving, and it causes there to be day and night. But my experience right now is a different time than maybe in some other part of the world. But we have to be dealing with objective truth first. We can't make sense of our subjective experiences if we're not first talking about objective truth. Thank you very much. That is a Stacy Trasancos quote that I just made up. We have to ground our thoughts and our ideas and our words in reality. There's an article, an expose piece written by Katie Herzog. It's very well done. She's a journalist, and she writes for Barry Weiss's column, Common Sense with Barry Weiss. And there's a very long article covering what medical schools are saying about biological sex. So I think this is something I honestly try not to think too much about during the day because it's distressing, it's confusing. But in this, she's doing a series about the spread of woke ideology in the field of medicine. And this concerns us all, okay? So maybe you don't care whether you're woke or not. Maybe you have kids who don't even really care about that word. But I'm sure you've all heard about this term, pregnant women, how it is not okay to call pregnant women women. You're supposed to say, according to them, pregnant person. I'm quoting a professor at the University of California who stopped mid-lecture. It was an endocrinology course at a top medical school at the University of California. He stopped mid-lecture to apologize for something he had said. I'm going to read his quote. "I don't want you to think that I am in any way trying to imply anything, and if you can summon some generosity to forgive me, I would really appreciate it." Again, I'm very sorry for that. It was certainly not my intention to offend anyone. The worst thing that I can do as a human being is to be offensive. What is he apologizing for? He's apologizing for saying when a woman is pregnant. He's apologizing for saying when a woman is pregnant. I mean, that's something we would think isn't offensive at all because it's just the truth, right? When a woman gets pregnant. And he's teaching a medical course. And he stops and he gets so shaken because he has said a pregnant woman. And he's apologizing because he didn't say pregnant person. And he's afraid that he offended someone. And I think we have a strong reaction to this because think about, this is what Katie is saying in her article, think about what that's doing with medical students. I mean, first of all, if it's, and it is objectively true, I'm just making an argument here. If it's objectively true that there are genders and sex, male, female, if it's objectively true that you're either male or female, and I know in certain rare cases there can be some genuine dysphoria or some physiological things that didn't develop right and need correcting. I know that. I understand in rare cases that can happen. But it's because it only is rare and confusing because we know there are two genders, male and female. And when you're and when you start teaching medical students that is just a social construct. So what they mean when they say that is just a social construct, they mean to say that it's just something we overlaid onto reality. It's just some terms we made up to, if you're pretty or not pretty, or if it's just a subjective explanation of something, that there's not actually male and not actually female. These are just social constructs. And so that is what the woke ideology says now. But the problem with that is when you get to medicine, you can't do that. You can't just decide the patient on the table is male or female and it doesn't really matter what the person actually is. You can't do that. And then this article, she gives some examples about what happens when doctors are taught to refuse to acknowledge sex. What happens with patient outcomes? She gives one example. Just recently, in 2019, the New England Journal of Medicine reported on a case of a 32-year-old transgender man who went to the emergency room with abdominal pain. The patient told them he was transgender, but his medical records didn't say that because this was a newer thing, and so the medical records didn't have that. The medical record, I guess the medical records just said that he is a man, see, it's confusing. I'm sorry. I get confused. The medical records showed that he is a man, not that this was a woman who transitioned to a man. So the doctors didn't know that. The triage nurse determined that the patient, who was obese, was in pain because he'd stopped taking a medication meant to relieve hypertension. This was, they thought, no emergency, so they put the patient back in the emergency room, in the waiting room, and waited. But what was actually happening was this woman who transitioned to be a man and said on the medical report, "I'm just a man," was in fact pregnant and in labor. And by the time the hospital staff realized there was a problem, the baby had died. Okay, and this patient was shattered. So that is a pretty extreme example, but it's a perfect example of why you can't just mess around with reality, and that's a healthy thing for people. In addition to those kind of situations, it has the medical community running around scared about what to say. And as someone who's, I'm not ever going to agree with that kind of approach to humanity because I know it's wrong. I'm not going to get on board with it and say any of it's good. I can't support any of that. But I do sometimes find myself being afraid what to say. And the professors are saying, that there may not be a lot of professors or medical professionals who are on board with this as being a good thing, this whole gender transitioning, the surgeries and the idea of it. But they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to say something because it could mean their job. It could mean losing your job. Once there's a lecture, there's another story in here. It's a lecture delivered on chromosomal disorders. And the professor used the pronouns she and her, as well as the terms father and son. And the students, so they have this way for students, even in real time in class from their computers, to basically tattletale on professors who use pronouns like that. Can you imagine? Who use pronouns like that? In a chromosomal disorder class, that she used she and her, father and son, and the students report it in real time during the class to a committee, an LGBTQ committee, who is policing this stuff. And so professors can get in trouble. They have to be very, very cautious. But a good question to ask is here: if a trans woman like the one in the hospital, or the trans man like the one in the hospital, was born a man, then why did there have to be transitional surgery? Like even the medical community, because they have to do these surgeries, knows this is not how the person was born to be. And it goes on, lots of examples, but just kind of polish this off, this idea, and how this hypersensitivity is undermining medical training. The thing that scares me as a parent, and what it's going to mean for my kids in the future. There are many illnesses, many conditions where they present differently and at different rates in male and female. Some examples: abdominal aortic aneurysms. They're 4 times as likely to occur in males than females. So doctors need to know the difference in the sex of the patient. Other conditions: hernias, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and asthma, among many others. Male and females have different normal ranges for kidney function, so that impacts drug dosage. They have different symptoms for heart attacks. Males complain of chest pain, while women experience fatigue, dizziness, and indigestion. So biological sex is a hugely important factor in knowing how to treat patients. And so if you have medical schools where the professionals and the students are afraid to use gender pronouns or words like woman and man and father and son, this is going to have an impact on today's medical students who will go on to hold professional positions and who will have a great deal of power over other people's bodies and minds. Future doctors, educators, researchers, statisticians who analyze the data, and psychologists. So what do we do about it? I think this is one of those things we definitely have to pray very specifically to Christ about how to handle it. And you know, I have all these kids. I have kids growing up in the world today, and I have kids who I see, my own children, get confused about this woke stuff to the point where sometimes they think they know better, or that mom's just so old-fashioned. And I'm saying it now because they grow out of it. It's a phase. And this article by Katie Herzog also explains that. A lot of these higher accounts among adolescents of gender dysphoria, and they undergo the hormone treatments to change their gender and to start to change their hormones so that they stop developing breasts and stop developing as males if they're male. These hormones stop these things. The heartbreaking thing is that a lot of these kids are just doing it because their friends are, and they're influenced by their friends. You have a little girl, you know, in junior high who's maybe has friends who are very pretty, very popular. They start to have boyfriends, and some little girls don't have boyfriends. Boys don't seem too interested in them, yet they get along just fine with their girlfriends. I've seen it happen. I've talked to principals where my kids go. This is the thing. Those little girls a lot of times go through a phase where they say, I'm gay, because they think they get along better with the same sex. It's just little girls being little girls, getting along better with girls because they're not ready to be dating yet. But it's happening, and it's very confusing. So I'm just telling you this for so we know about it. How you deal with that in your daily life, that's going to have to come with prayer. But this is a thing that's happening in our medical communities. It's something we need to keep pushing back on and tell the truth about. I'm Stacy Trasancos, in for Timmerie, and when we come back after the break, I want to talk about how neuroscience approves of a holy imagination. See you in a little bit.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Hello, this is Stacy Trasancos. Just got a little bit more time here with you. This is a heavy show, going from St. John Henry Newman on the cost of conviction and how being Catholic changes your whole life, to medical schools denying biological sex and the repercussions this is going to have in the future, and how we need to pray if we don't have enough faith, or if we feel like we don't have enough faith, or if we're worried about something, to pray specifically, and how we get all of our loved ones to heaven. We have just covered a lot already, and had a wonderful caller from Herminia from California. The last thing I want to talk about that I think is important enough that you need to know about this today. The article is at Fathom magazine, and it's called Neuroscience Approves of a Holy Imagination. Now, let me explain what this means, and then let me Catholicize it for you, okay? That's what I like to do with articles like this. I like to comb through and get the tangles out and make sure the truth that's already in there is further illuminated with the light of faith and what Catholic teaching says. Kind of, you know, that's what Aquinas and the medieval scholars did with the Greek scientific corpus. They just comb through it all and Christianize it, and that's what I want to do with this today. And it is written by a Christian. I just have some things to add to it. So, neuroscience approves of a holy imagination. What is this about? The author here is describing a transcendent moment where it's before dinner. I think moms have felt this. You vacuum the house, everything's neat, tidy, in its place, and you're looking around at all the pictures on the walls and the items that fill your house. And she had a holy moment. She had a moment when she was filled with such awe and wonder at the beauty all around her, the meaningfulness of the little sanctuary of her house, the evening light pouring in on the quilt bedspread, and just had this transcendent moment where it was a timeless moment. It was a moment where you just felt suspended above everything, and she was restored, okay? And she's writing about the neuroscience of the emotion and social connection, and describes the polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory. This is the understanding that our nervous system relies on 3 automatic and interactive pathways, 3 pathways that help connect us with the transcendent, and in doing so also help connect us with each other. Okay, so first of all, polyvagal pathway, what is that? Okay, I'm always like, what is that? I just need to know what that is. That is a set of 3 pathways that intersect nerve pathways. Okay, so nervous things, the cells running through your body, the long ones, they intersect through our vagus nerve, or through that long cranial nerve that runs from our skull to our abdomen, so right down the center of our body. Each pathway offers a clue, she says, into the mystery of how God uses times of beauty to awaken and refresh us. Okay, so the 3 pathways, one is the dorsal lateral. Okay, that's the first pathway. It helps us to slow down, this nervous pathway. It runs from the back side of our bodies, from the skull to the stomach. This pathway aids in digestion. Just let me finish this. I want to get through these. And rest. It's the main pathway we emerge from when we awake from our sleep. And what does that mean, pathway? That means where the neurons are firing, where the electricity is flowing through your nervous system. So that dorsal lateral is one. The other one, then they all cross at the vagus nerve. The sympathetic nervous pathway is number 2. Okay, this helps us mobilize. It's the flight or fight pathway. It's the one that gets us going. Okay. We determine incoming threats, and we get the energy to either run away or to fight it. The third one is the ventral vagal pathway, running from the skull to our heart and abdomen. So kind of like the dorsal one, only in the front. And it allows us to be present in the world from a place of openness and ease. Okay. Now I'll be honest. I'm a chemist. Being present to the world from a place of openness and ease does not compute in my head. I have no idea what that means in terms of atoms and molecules. And if I were going to really dig into this, I would have to look that up, because I couldn't just go with that poetic language if we're talking about science. I couldn't do it. But what she's trying to say is that these 3 different pathways sort of play together, okay? And they help us have this calm feeling, okay, with her experience about noticing the beauty in her house. It was a blended state of dorsal lateral and ventral vagal, so the front and the back, the resting and the openness. And then she felt, when she shared that experience with other people, she felt spacious because she was tapping into the ventral vagal pathway. Let's just say there are, because nerves are cells, and they are little machines, and they have very specific chemical reactions. Let's just say that even though I don't know exactly what that means in terms of atoms and molecules and stresses me out, there are things very specifically and physiological going on with the atoms and molecules, okay? So those things in your body are happening in your nervous system. It's an energy flow. Your nerves do communicate by electricity flow through your body. It's an energy flow through your body. Your nervous system, your central nervous system, responds differently to feelings of peace, okay? But I wouldn't say that it's your neuroscience approving of a holy imagination, because here's the main thing. When I say that science is the study of the handiwork of God, I would never say that science approves of anything holy. I would say that's backwards. I would say that we discovered this really cool thing about our created bodies, that God created us to have more peace and calm feelings because of what the atoms and molecules are doing when we feel this transcendent feeling. So I would say that our bodies are made to have holy imaginations. Okay, that's what I would say. The article also, this last part I just want to leave you with, it's kind of cool. The article says that when we are, that this helps us connect with other people. That when we understand how these pathways are working in our body and we're aware of them, it's helping us connect with other people. And that's kind of like, mama moment. when I have a toddler, when I used to have, I have toddler grandchildren now, toddler that is having a meltdown in front of me, what are you supposed to do as the parent? Are you supposed to throw yourself on the floor and have a meltdown too? Now, when I was a young parent, that's exactly what I did. Throw yourself down on the floor and have a meltdown too. And then both of you are having meltdowns, and the toddler gets even more upset because mom is also freaking out too. The point here is, no, you don't do that. If you, who are more in control of your emotions and your vagal pathways, if you take a deep breath and you stay calm, there, physiologically and psychologically, we know that that toddler will also stay calm. And so what that means is that to us as evangelists out there in the world, stay calm, have those holy moments, be praying all the time, go to Mass, receive the sacraments, and know that just your peace and sanctity will have an effect of increasing the peace and sanctity and happiness on the whole world. Okay, so that's Stacy Trasancos with my take on neuroscience and holy imaginations. Just do what the church says, okay? That's my answer to everything. Do what the church says, and thank God that your atoms and molecules are doing what God tells them to do. I will see you in a couple of days. I'll be back on Thursday. Until then, God bless you, love you, and keep you.